Sadhu, sadhu, Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Yavaki vanchami bhikkhave imesu chatusu arya satchesu Evang ti parivattang dvadasakharang yatha bhutang jnana dasanang nasu visuddhang ahosi Nevata vahang bhikkhave sadevake loke samarake sabrahmake Sassamanak brahmaniya pajaya sadeva manusaya anuttarang Samma sambodhing abhisambuddho pacchanyasing. Homage to the Buddha. Dear friends in the Dhamm. So every year in the morning I give sermon. It is based on the Dhammacakka Sutta. Most of you are familiar with this sermon, but hope you will listen to this sermon today also. But if you can attain enlightenment, that is the most important aspect, important thing. Hope I don't think I will make you bored, but it is Dhamma. Sometimes we all like to listen to the songs and things, but when you are listening to the sermon, it is obvious you can fall asleep. So don't sleep. Try to concentrate and listen and get something out of this. So the passage I have recited it from the Dhammacakka Sutta. In that Buddha said, when the Buddha gave his first discourse to the 5 ascetics at Benares, he said that as long as he had not understood the Four Noble Truths in all their manifold detail, he did not claim that he attained perfect enlightenment. But when he completely understood the Four Noble Truths, then he claimed that he had attained the supreme perfect enlightenment. From this statement, we can measure the importance of this teaching for understanding the Buddha's message. In the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, Buddha, it is said that Chatunnang Arya Satchanang Yatha Bhutang Adassana Sansitang Digamaddanang Tasu Tasveva Jatisu Tani Etani Dittani Bhavaniti Samohata Uchinnang Mula Dukkasya Natti Dani Punabhavoti. That is also another very important the sayings of the Buddha. There Buddha said, because it is through not realized sin, through not penetrating the Four Noble Truths, that this long course of birth and death has been passed through and undergone by me as well as by you. What are these four? They are the noble truth of suffering, the noble truth of origin of suffering, the noble truth of cessation of suffering, and the noble truth of the way to cessation of suffering. But, Buddha said, but now, because that these have been realized and penetrated, cut off is the craving for existence, destroyed is that which lead to renewed becoming, and there is no fresh becoming. The Buddha further said, from lack of vision of the Four Noble Truths, we have wandered a long time simply in these birth and loss. These are now seen. The guide to becoming is removed. Trust is the root of suffering and stress. There is now. no further becoming. In this statement, Buddha wanted to say that we are all in the samsara, being born again and dying again. Why it is happening, Buddha said, because we don't understand, we didn't understand the Four Noble Truths. So that is why when someone understands it, then there is no birth, no becoming in that. That is what Buddha said. So that is why we want to say, whatever we learn, we may learn a lot of books, Dharma books and things, but until we realize the Four Noble Truths thoroughly, then there is no way of escaping in this samsara. So that is why I am insisting to try to understand the Four Noble Truths. Then it is a good way of having happiness. The Buddha's teaching what we call the Dhamma, the truth or the law. To examine the teaching carefully is especially important because as a religious founder, the Buddha functioned mainly as a teacher, not as a personal savior. And therefore, he gave first place to his teaching. We all can remember, Buddha said, Yo dhammam pasati, so mam pasati. Yo mam pasati, so dhammam pasati. That is what Buddha said. If you wanted to see the Buddha, understand the Buddha's teaching, and also when you understand the teachings of the Buddha, then you are seeing the Buddha. That is what Buddha said. The Dhammacakka Sutta can be discussed under two main headings. One is its doctrine. The other is the path of practice. The principal formation of doctrine is the Four Noble Truths. The principal formation of the practice is the Noble Eightfold Path. That is one side doctrine and also the path of practice. Same thing, but we can divide it. Then you can see those things are interconnected, linked. You can see the Noble Eightfold Path. The fourth of Four Noble Truths, while the first step of Buddha explained is Noble Eightfold Path is the right view. That means the Sammaditthi, means the understanding the Four Truths. Of the first two, the doctrine naturally comes first. For the doctrine make the clear the context for the practice. In those four, that we can say that those are the doctrine, but practice come later. The Four Noble Truths, as you all know, the Noble Truth of suffering, dukkha ariya satya, the Noble Truth of origin of suffering, dukkha samudaya satya, the third one, Noble Truth of cessation of suffering, dukkha nirodha satya, nirodha ariya satya, the Noble Truth of the way of cessation of suffering, it called the dukkha nirodha gamini ariya satya. Then this formula make it plain enough that the Four Noble Truths are revolved around a common subject that is named the problem of suffering. All those four have sufferings. They view this subject from four different angles. Problem itself, its cause, its resolution, and the mean of resolution. So that is simple way. The Pali word dukkha is translated as suffering. But it has far deeper and wider implication than the English word suffering. The Pali word dukkha originally means pain, suffering, misery, etc. But the Buddha took this term of common usage and made it the cornerstone of comprehensive philosophical vision. Within the context of the Buddha's teaching, dukkha does not mean simply pain and suffering, but indicates a basic unsatisfactoriness at the very root of individual existence, a note of failure that lies behind all worldly pleasures and achievements. So that is what this dukkha means. It is not just a pain, it is unsatisfactoriness and all the pleasures and whatever things we are facing day-to-day life. All things are included in this dukkha. The reason for all worldly conditions is called, said to be dukkha. It is because they are all impermanent and unstable. So that is the meaning. Because those are impermanent and unstable. Because they lack any substantial core or absolute self, and because they cannot give us lasting happiness, secure against change and loss. The word dukkha therefore indicates fundamental lack of perfection in life. Whatever the things you are facing here today in this very life, so all are, we can say it is the dukkha. You can think whether you have any permanent happiness, whatever enjoyment you had in your life, is there any permanent? So that is why when you go on a holiday and after finishing that you are planning for another one, and whatever the possessions you have, but you are not satisfied it because you wanted to have new one, another one. So that is the way it is. Whatever the pleasure things, it gives sometimes some kind of pleasure, but afterwards it goes away, then you are finding new. So that is why Buddha wants to say all those things are temporary things. So it goes away. The Four Noble Truths fit together in a tight logical pattern. The logic of the pattern is governed by the law of cause and effect. The first two truths show the law of cause and effect in relation to suffering and bondage. First, the Buddha highlights the effect, namely that its effect is suffering. Then he points out the cause of suffering, which is craving. The second noble truth, show the law of cause and effect with respect to happiness and liberation. First, the cessation of suffering, which is Nibbana, and then the means of attaining Nibbana, the Noble Eightfold Path. Hope you understand what you want to say. So these four divided, two explain about the suffering and bondage, why these things happen. Then the Buddha explained how to get rid of that, and also how to attain happiness, that is Nibbana. How to attain the Nibbana, he has explained in the Four Noble Truths. The Buddha here reversed the usual order to cause and effect because he showing their respective causes. He first wanted to alert us to the fact that our lives are persuaded by suffering, and that complete release from suffering is possible. Once we are brought to see that our lives are problematic, then we need to learn the cause in order to remove it. And once we gain confidence that release from suffering is attainable, then we need to know the path we must follow to attain that release. So in this respect, the structure of the Four Noble Truths runs perfectly parallel to the formula of a doctor might use to treat a patient. So we all go to doctors, but sometimes there are bad doctors too. But first, when you go to a doctor, what they do, they ask what you have, what is the problem with you. Then he thinks this may be, but he doesn't decide it, but we need some kind of test. Then you will have MRI, whatever, all those things. Then after doing all those things, then he prognosticates that, oh, you have these things. Then he will decide what the medicine you can use to cure that problem. So that is the way the Buddha wanted to show that there is suffering in this world, and also the why these things happening, and the how to get rid of it, and path to get rid of that suffering. That is what Buddha has done. So let us look at these Four Noble Truths. You may be bored, but it is nice to listen again and again this teaching. So, first one is Noble Truth of Suffering. Then Buddha clarified the first Noble Truth, not with explanation, but with a list of different type of suffering we encounter during our lives. Buddha said, Idang kopana bhikkhave dukkhang arya saccang jatipi dukkha jarapi dukkha vyadipi dukkho maranampi dukkhang appihe sampayogo dukkho piyehi vippayogo dukkho yam piccang nalabati tampi dukkhang sankityena panchupadanakkhandha dukkha. All these things explained as a list of suffering. The Buddha began with the four kinds of suffering: birth, old age, illness, and death. Those are the four things. Jati, Jara, Vyadi, Marana. There is no doubt that the last three are suffering. That means the old age, illness, and death. We all are subject to that, but it is suffering. We know that, all of it. And we feel miserable with these changes into old age, illness, and imminent death. So that is obvious. And birth is suffering simply because it is the passageway to all the other type of suffering. I think you all agree with that. Because as we are being born, so we are all subject to have this suffering. So, next the Buddha mentioned three type of mental suffering: to be united with disagreeable people and conditions, to be separated from agreeable people and conditions, and not to get what one wants, what one wants. Finally, he makes a statement hard to understand. In brief, the five aggregates subject to clinging are suffering. So others we can understand, but when we come to this Sankittena Panchupadanakkhandha dukkha, that is the difficult part to understand, and that is the main thing to understand of us. The five aggregates subject to clinging, Panchupadanakkhandha, are the basic component of our existence, the elements that make up our individual beings. So that is what we are. We are all Panchupadanakkhandha, right? The five are physical form, because we all have feeling, perception, volitional factors, and consciousness. Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana. Those are the things. Rupa, when you together all these things, they are called aggregates because each one is a collection of components. And they are described as subject to clinging, because these are the things to which we usually cling with the notion that they are our personal identity or self, because we think about our body is our self, although we know that there is change, but we think it is mine. But we don't understand its change, because when it is changing, then you become sad too. Because we don't understand that has nothing to do with I. All our experience can be analyzed into these five components. There is no permanent self, any Atma, either behind them or within them. The five aggregates are all anatta, not mine, not I, not the self. That is difficult to understand, but that is the fact. They are temporary events, constantly changing, arising and passing away in quick succession. Physical form of the body, it is an order of changing physical phenomena, that our tissues, cells, molecules, atoms, electrons, arising, changing and vanishing. That is what happened. So 30 years ago we met, but the now has changed. All the body has changed. Little bit appears is still there, but it is also going away. So that is the way it is. So to our feelings, we all have different, we enjoy sometimes, we have feelings, but whatever the feelings we had, all these things are not permanent things, whatever you enjoy. All these temporary things that it has gone. And also the volitional perception and volitions are merely momentary mental events, likewise arising and vanishing every moment. Finally, even consciousness, the basic faculty of cognition, is not the stable, lasting self, but a process of awareness, a succession of individual occasion of cognition. Only we have that consciousness, but it goes away again and again. It is succession, it is changing. While sitting, you are here, but your mind also going around. That is the way. But it is nothing permanent. Because these five aggregates which make us our existence, those are impermanent and constantly perishing. The Buddha said they are all dukkha or suffering. They are incapable of giving us permanent happiness or complete satisfaction. We can never find in them the stable, lasting happiness for which we desire. All those, whatever the enjoyment, whatever the things come to, those are not lasting for long, those change. So, when the Buddha says that all conditioned existence is dukkha, he does not mean that we are continually experiencing pain and misery. He openly acknowledged that life includes pleasure as well as pain, happiness as well as sorrow, success and satisfaction as well as failure and frustration. What he maintained, however, is that even our present experiences are temporary and unreliable. The more we cling to them in the hope of getting lasting satisfaction out of them, more we make ourselves exposed to future disappointment. If we are to free ourselves from suffering, we must look beneath the surface of our pleasures and see not only their enjoyable surface, but the waiting dangers, the potential pitfalls being dug by our clinging and attachment. So most suffering comes to looking for pleasure. That is what happened most of the time. So we want to get more, but that thing also gives more pain and suffering to our life. So that is why Buddha wanted to show us to understand that, because then that clinging will be eradicated or being less. When the clinging is less, then there is no suffering at much. So Buddha wants to say that clinging to this attachment is making us to have more pain and miseries in our life. To appreciate the meaning of First Noble Truth, it is in full depth and range. We need to take account of the fact that Buddha teaches rebirth based on his own enlightenment. He clearly declares that all living beings in whom ignorance and craving remain are subject to wandering in samsara, So that is what I said in the first instance. Round of rebirth, because as we don't understand. This process of repeated existence, punabhava we call it, has been going on throughout beginningless time, with no creation and no first point. There is no soul which transmigrates through the round of existence, no permanent self which goes from life to life, while retaining its essential identity. But without any self or soul, the stream of existence flow on from life to life and unbroken continue. Consciousness continues as an ever-changing current, taking rebirth in one or another mode of being as determined by the karma one has generated during one's life. The statement of the beginningless process of rebirth gives an additional dimension of depth to the first noble truth, for it is important that the suffering we experience in any one life must be multiplied by infinity. Again and again, we undergo birth, old age, illness, and death. Again and again we experience sorrow, grief, pain, dejection, and despair. Sometimes we may be reborn under pleasure condition, even as a powerful Deva or God in the highest heaven. Some people like to go. There we may live for thousands of years with all the requisites of pleasure and power for our command. But life everywhere eventually comes to an end. Even the gods must perish and pass away. And then we move on to a new existence in which we face again the perspective of birth, aging, and death, and perhaps even misery, dreadful beyond endure. So that is why some people, they like to be born as devas. That is a good idea, but the thing is, so we have to come back, but when we come back, we don't know where we are going to be. So that is what we have to think. To find perfect happiness and peace, we must attain release from samsara. We must break and free from our bondage to the five aggregates clinging. To win this freedom, we must eliminate the cause of our bondage, and this means to eradicate the origin of suffering. The first noble truth, which is, that's why Buddha said there are three aspects of first noble truth. We have to have understanding. There is suffering, that means dukkha. Then dukkha should be understood. Then the Buddha said, dukkha has been understood if someone understood it. So that is what three aspects comes in the first noble truth. When you look at the first noble truth, Buddha is not only saying that there is suffering, but in that sermon you will find we are learning a lot of the factors explained in Buddha's teaching. That is like the karma and rebirth, and all these things also explained in that sermon. Then we come to the second noble truth, that is the noble truth, the origin of suffering. That the Buddha in that said, in Pali it says, Idam kopana bhikkhave dukkha samudayam ariya satyam yayam tanha pono bhavika nandiraga sagata tatra tatrabhinyandini seyati idam kama tanha bhava tanha vipasanna. What is the noble truth of the origin of suffering? Buddha said it is craving, which produces repeated existence, which is bound up with delight and lust, and seek delight here and there. That is sensual pleasures, craving for existence and craving for annihilation. The Pali word tanha literally means thirst. We all have thirst. Therefore, craving is blind desire, selfish desire, a bottomless thirst which is ever seeking more and more enjoyment. The Buddha enumerates three kinds of craving. The first is sensual craving, desire for delightful sense objects, that is called kama tanha. The second craving is for existence, is a desire to go on existing, to experience more and more, which harden in the clinging to life and body. So that is called the bhava tanha. The third craving is for annihilation. It's the desire for non-existence, which arises when life becomes so unbearable, so that one seeks solace by adopting the view that at death one's personal existence comes to complete end. That is called vibhava tanha. There's some belief on that, because some people, they don't believe on rebirth, so they think that is it, so we don't think about it. That is what. But Buddha said that is also another craving. That craving also a bad thing, because that craving is lead to suicide and things. So that is what Buddha said. The second noble truth, with its three aspects, that is also we have to understand. There is a origin of suffering, which is the attachment to desire. Then the desire should be let go of. Then lastly we can say it has gone. The third noble truth we come to, it comes from logically from the second truth. For if craving is the cause of suffering, then the way to eliminate suffering is to eliminate craving. Therefore the Buddha said, Idan ko pana bhikkhave dukkha nirodhang arya saccang yotasayeva tanhaya asesa viraga nirodho chago patinisaggo mutti analeya. What is the noble truth of cessation of suffering? It is the reminderless fading away and cessation of that same craving, whatever we have mentioned, the second noble truth. The abandoning and giving up it, not attachment and freedom from it. The cessation of suffering, what we call then, is Nibbana, the highest happiness and peace. When craving is eliminated, all the mental unhappiness caused by craving is also removed. The mind is released from the fever of the passion and attain dispassion. That is called the viraga. Freed from all sorrows, it becomes sorrowless, asoka. Freed from all bonds, it enjoys supreme peace and security. That is called the anuttara yogakkema. This is the inward state of the arahant. That is when someone attains enlightenment, the worthy one. The person attains nibbana in this very life we call the arahant, the freed from ignorance and craving. The arahants can never again be touched by fear, anxiety, disappointment, and worry. With the breakup of the body at death, the life process of the arahant at last comes to an end. After following on through beginningless time, the round of rebirth is broken. Now that arahant attained the ultimate stage of nibbana, in which there is no residue of the element of conditioned existence. The continuum of the five aggregates come to an end. So that is the time we finish the five aggregates. And there remains only the deathless element, which the Buddha called the unborn, unmade, unbecome, and unconditioned. This is the end of the Buddha's teaching and the results of his disciples. The third noble truth, with its three aspects of, there is the cessation of suffering, the cessation of dukkha should be realized. The cessation of dukkha has been realized. That is what we can say when we understand the third noble truth. Then we come to the fourth noble truth. It teaches how to reach nibbana, how to attain the end of suffering, how to realize the deathless. This is the Buddha's course of treatment for disease of suffering. The way is Noble Eightfold Path made up 8 factors. You all know that: right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Noble Eightfold Path brings us to the second major aspect of Buddha's teaching, that is called the path of practice. Buddha has given the cause and effect, and also the Buddha here explained the path, how to get rid of that suffering. The path, because suffering originated from craving, the purpose of walking the Buddha's path is to eliminate craving. This is not a forceful, ascetic routine of suppression and self-affliction, but the wholesome, hygienic training that gradually transforms one's conduct, mental attitude, and understanding. All these things has that quality. The Buddha called the Noble Eightfold Path the middle way, because it avoids the 2 extremes of sensual indulgence and ascetic self-torment. Buddha said, in that sermon, Buddha said, "De me bhikkhave anta pabbajitena nasevi tabba katame dve yochayan kamesu kama sukallikana yogo hino gammo potu janiko anariyo anatta sanghito yochayan attakilamatana yogo dukkho anariyo anatta sanghito." Buddha said one extreme, in the Buddha's own word, was the constant attachment to sensual pleasures, Kama Sukallikana Yoga. Buddha described this extreme as base, vulgar, worldly, ignoble, and profitless. So Attakilamatana Yoga is he removed totally because he has experienced it. And that means he Kamasukallikana, he left it first instant when he was a king, he enjoyed all those things, he said it is not giving anything. The other extreme is the constant addiction to self-mortification, Attakilamatana Yoga. Commenting on this extreme, which is not practiced by the ordinary man, the Buddha remarked that it is painful, ignoble, and profitless. That is also removed. The Buddha said, Eteko bhikkhave ubhavante anupagamma majjhima patipada tathagatena abhisambuddha chakkukarani jnanakarani upasamaya abhiññāya sambodhaya nibbānāya sanghati. Buddha said that the Tathagata himself, realizing the error of both these 2 extremes, followed the middle path. This new path or way was discovered by himself. Buddha earned his new system. Buddha termed this new system as the Majjhima Patipada, the middle way. To persuade his disciples to give attention to his new path, he spoke of its various blessings. Unlike the 2 extremes we have mentioned earlier, the middle path produces spiritual insight and intellectual wisdom to see as they truly are. When the insight is clarified and the intellectual is sharpened, everything is seen in its true perspective. The path, however, is not mere compromise between these extremes, but the truly wise disciple or personal transformation with difficult mind training and deep insight into the real nature of existence. So to understand that you have that type of qualities. Buddha called this a good path because it is pure and wholesome in the beginning, middle, and end. It is also a happy path because the further one advances along it, the more one experiences joy, happiness, and peace. As we understand, the aim of the path is to remove craving. Now, this might seem to be present difficult problem because craving is so deeply rooted in our minds that we cannot dump it away simply by an act of will, thinking that I won't remove it. You can't do that. However, Buddha discovered that craving, as powerful as it may be, it's also conditioned. It depends for its existence on the condition. It is nurtured by conditions. The primary condition on which it depends is the ignorance. That means avijja. Due to avijja, we cannot remove this craving. So ignorance is not merely lack of knowledge or certain facts. It is destroyed ways to perceive and interpret our experience through the filters created by our deluded desires and egocentric point of view. To eliminate ignorance, what we must do is to generate knowledge or wisdom. That's what we call panya. Not mere conceptual knowledge, not an accumulation of itemized information, but direct insight which penetrate beneath the appearance of things as seen they are. The Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path is the Buddha's strategy for generating this insight. His strategy was that. In this first sermon, he described the path as Chakku Karani, Jnana Karani, leading to vision, leading to knowledge. The 8 factors that make a path are not merely steps to be followed in sequence, one after another. They are other elements in the single integral path, although at the outset they do not unfold in some sort of sequence. Once the practice teaches the highest level of maturity, the 8 factors operate all together, with each factor contribution to its own unique way to the total efficacy of the path. So as time is running out, I am not going to say about the Eightfold Path that much, but we have to say about the right view. We all need right view. Without right view, we cannot proceed in this path. So path is, there are 2 levels of right understanding, right view. That is called, the Buddha places this factor on the head of the path, because in order to take up the practice of the Dhamma, we must begin with a clear conceptual understanding of where we stand, and where we are heading. This is like traveling for wherever you want to, but you need to have understanding where you are going, otherwise you will be get lost. So to begin the journey towards enlightenment with a right view has 2 levels, both of which are critical to following the Buddha's path to its end. The first, the lower type of right view, is understanding of principles of karma and its fruits, because some people don't believe on karma and its fruits. So that without that you cannot proceed. This means recognition that we are responsible for our intentional actions, that good and bad deeds bring forth consequences that correspond to the ethical nature of those deeds. Our life does not end with death, but continue in order forms in which reap the fruits of our good and bad deeds. That is second factor, to believe on the rebirth. It means accepting the objective of moral distinction between the wholesome and unwholesome, accepting that deed can be distinguished in terms of their moral qualities, realizing that our deeds have the capacity to produce result. The fundamental relationship suggested by the teaching of karma are that good deeds bring happiness and good rebirth, while the evil deed brings suffering and a bad rebirth. So that is the first level of understanding, right understanding. The higher type of right view is understanding the Four Noble Truths themselves. This enables us to see our existential situation as it is, to recognize that we suffer because of our own craving, and to see that to attain freedom from suffering, we must eliminate craving by treading the Eightfold Path. This right view begins as a mere conceptual understanding of the truth. As the practice matures and insight arises, it turns into experiential wisdom of the truth. So I am not going to say details on right intention, what you have. It should have the intention of selfish desire, sensuality, and also we should have the attention of benevolence, kind wish, and also that is avyapada sankappa, and also we should have the intention of harmlessness, that is ahimsa sankappa. All these things are necessary, and also right speech also, we know that it is has 4 components, that is the abstaining from the false speech and instead of speaking truth. Abstinence from divisive speech and speaking words that conduce to harmony. And also abstaining from harsh speech and speaking gently. And abstinence from idle chatter and speaking what is meaningful and proper occasion. The right action also has some kind of, not only abstaining from killing, and instead of acting gently and compassionately, abstaining from stealing and observing honesty, and abstaining from sexual misconduct, which is for layperson means respecting others' marital rights, and for the monks and nuns for complete celibacy. The right livelihood, which the Buddha explained as earning one's living by a righteous and honest occupation. The Buddha has mentioned some kind of trade not to follow. Last 3 factors are most important factors explained. Right effort, samma vayama, and that it's to avoid from all the unwholesome deeds and also develop wholesome deeds. And also right mindfulness, you are all talking most of the time about the mindfulness. That means the clear awareness of close attention direct to the subject of contemplation. The Buddha has organized beautifully that Satipatthana Sutta explained what are the 4 factors we should follow. Kaya-anupassana, Veda-anupassana, Chitta-anupassana, and Dhamma-anupassana. Right concentration, right effort, and right mindfulness function in harmony to give rise to right concentration. Right concentration defined as the 4 stages of dhyana, deep meditative absorption, culminating in protect one pointedness of mind and unruffled equanimity. Right concentration is the last factor to reach maturity, but it is certainly not the goal. When concentration is successfully established, one must then use all 8 factors of the path at the same time to generate wisdom. So that is very important. Wisdom is direct insight into things as they really are, and the things to be penetrated by insight are our body and mind as compromised in the 5 aggregates subject to clinging. What one must see with insight are the real characteristic of 5 aggregates, which the Buddha has summed up in the 3 marks of existence. So it is a beautiful, another teaching comes to us that is called anicca, impermanence, and dukkha and anatta, that is called the non-self. All the 5 aggregates that make up our being are impermanent, ever-changing, arising and perishing each moment. They are all bound up with suffering, and none can be taken as permanent self. They are not mine, not I, not myself. So that is what insight we call it. As insight penetrates ever more deeply into five aggregates, it gives rise to successively more profound level of understanding. This understanding culminates in the clear vision of the Four Noble Truths in their deep and wide implication. It is the highest knowledge that eliminates the mind's defilement, ignorance, craving, and mistaken views, and issues of perfect liberation of mind. This liberation of mind, the fruit of integrated concentration and wisdom, is the highest goal of the Buddha's teaching, to be realized here and now by dedicated practice of the Noble Eightfold Path. Not all can reach the final goal in a single life, but succeed is a matter of gradual practice, gradual progress, gradual attainment. So that is why in the Dhammacakka Sutta, it is nicely said, lastly it says, Imasminch pana veya karanasmin bhanjamane ayasmuto kondanyas virajam vitamalan Dhammacakkam udapadi yankinchi samude dhammam sabbang tang nirodha dhamma. That is what important sayings of the Buddha say. Whatever is subject to causation, all is subject to cessation. So whatever the feelings, whatever the things, all come to this world, but it has to go. So Kondanya understood that, and also that's why Buddha said, Anya sivatabu Kondanyo. Kondanya understood that. So in this Dhammacakka, that is the main teachings of the Buddha. I'm not going to go further with, but Buddha said that first this Four Noble Truths should be understood. That's called the first noble truth is suffering, that is dukkha. Suffering should be known. That is called the pariññaya. Suffering has been known, pariññāta. Then second noble truth is craving, that is tanha. That craving should be abandoned, pahatabba. Craving has been abandoned, pahinam. Then third noble truth is nirvana, that's mean nibbana. Nibbana should be realized, satchika tappa, and nibbana has been realized, satchikata. The fourth noble truth is path of patipada, we call it. The path should be cultivated. That is mean bhave tappa. The path has been cultivated. After cultivating it, path has been cultivated. We call the bhavitam. So that was the Buddha's sermon on this day. Esala Purnima, the Esala full moon day, Buddha has given this sermon to 5 monks, but we have given to 40 people who I hope somebody will understand the teachings of these sermons of the Buddha. May we all have understanding of the Four Noble Truths, and may this act of meritorious deed help us to attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Okay. Now we are going to have the Buddha Puja. So I would like to ask our Dayakas to bring the Buddha Puja to the shrine, please.